If that girl ever contacts my son again, I will destroy everything she has ever loved." Margaret Thorne said it quietly, calmly, the way people say things they have already decided are done. Then she picked up the fabricated emails, the forged evidence, the falsified letters that would end her son's marriage before Elena's pregnancy showed, and she fed them one by one into the hands of a lawyer she paid enough to never ask questions. She smoothed her jacket, checked her reflection, and walked out to dinner like she had simply taken out the trash. 5 years later, Sebastian walked into a restaurant, and the trash had 3 faces, and every single one of them had his eyes. If you're new here, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Sebastian Thorne had not eaten a meal alone in a restaurant in 4 years, not because he lacked the appetite, and not because Manhattan was short on restaurants. He had a personal chef on retainer in his penthouse on the 53rd floor of the Thorne Tower. He had a private dining room on the executive floor of his headquarters where he conducted power lunches with venture capitalists and senators. He had standing reservations at every 3 Michelin-star establishment in the city reservations that his assistant maintained like sacred obligations, even when Sebastian never showed. He did not eat alone in restaurants because he had learned slowly and painfully over the last 5 years that restaurants carried memory, the way old houses carry the smell of the people who used to live in them. And Sebastian Thorne could not afford memory. Memory was the one thing his $3 billion empire had no defense against. But on this particular Tuesday in October, something broke inside him. He could not name it. He had been sitting in a board meeting on the 47th floor, surrounded by 12 people who were each paid obscene salaries to tell him what he wanted to hear, reviewing the acquisition of a mid-size logistics company that would add another $200 million to his portfolio. And somewhere in the middle of the CFO's presentation, Sebastian had simply stopped listening. Not drifted. Stopped. He had looked at his own hands flat on the polished conference table and thought, I have been in this room 10,000 times. And then he had stood up, and without explanation, without apology, without even picking up his phone, he had walked out. His assistant Marcus had chased him into the elevator with a tablet and a look of barely contained panic. Mr. Thorne, the Meridian team is still presenting. You have the Hartwell call at 2, the Singapore delegation at 4, and your mother is expecting you at the foundation dinner at 7. Cancel everything, Sebastian said. The elevator doors closed. He walked out of Thorne Tower into the October air and simply kept moving. No direction, no destination. His security details scrambled to follow him at a discreet distance the way they always did, when he had what Marcus quietly called one of his episodes. These rare, unpredictable moments when the machine of Sebastian Thorne simply refused to run. He walked 14 blocks south and 3 blocks west before he stopped. He stopped because of the smell. Garlic and rosemary and something sweet underneath honey maybe, or caramelized onion drifting out through a propped open door onto the sidewalk. And before his mind could catch up with his body, Sebastian was standing in front of a restaurant he had not seen in 5 years and had spent 5 years trying not to think about, the Olive Branch Bistro. The sign had been repainted. The awning was new, a deep green where it used to be faded burgundy, but the door with its small wrought iron olive branch handle was the same. The window boxes were the same, and the way the afternoon light hit the glass was exactly precisely devastatingly the same as it had been the first time a 24-year-old Elena Sanchez had grabbed his sleeve on a rainy Friday and said, "In here, trust me, the bread alone will change your life." Sebastian stood on the sidewalk and could not move. He had loved her more than he had ever admitted even to himself. He had loved her in the careless, consuming way that people love things they believe will simply always be there, the way you love oxygen, without gratitude, without attention, until it's gone. He had married her at 30, this bright, stubborn, laughing woman who was working 2 jobs to pay off medical school debt and still managed to find joy in things as small as a good loaf of bread. He had built his empire through their marriage working hours that were incompatible with human connection. Telling himself there would be time later, more time that she understood that she was patient, that she would always be there. She had not always been there. She had left, and the divorce papers had arrived through his lawyer, and the grounds had been irreconcilable differences, and Sebastian had read those 2 words in the back of his car on the way to a meeting, and had not cried because he did not cry, had not cried since he was 9 years old. But something inside him had quietly and completely closed. He had not been back to the Olive Branch Bistro. Until today. He pushed open the door. The inside was warm and smelled like bread and coffee. It was the lunch rush, and every table was occupied with the comfortable noise of a neighborhood place. Conversations overlapping silverware, a child's laugh somewhere in the back. Sebastian stood in the entrance and felt for the first time in years something that was almost peace. And then the world fell out from under him. She was standing near the back of the restaurant beside the large corner booth that Sebastian remembered was always the most coveted table in the place. She had her back half turned to him, and she was wearing a dark blue sweater, and her hair. God, her hair was still that same deep brown, still worn, pulled back the way she used to do when she was working, and she was leaning down saying something to someone in the booth. Sebastian's brain registered Elena before his body did. His feet stopped, his chest locked, and then Elena Sanchez straightened up, turned slightly to reach for something on the table, and Sebastian saw the stroller. Not a stroller, a triple stroller. One of those long architectural constructions of aluminum and fabric designed for the specific exhausting purpose of transporting 3 children simultaneously. It was parked at the end of the booth, and it was not empty. 3 children. He could see 2 faces clearly from where he stood, framed in the openings of the stroller canopies, round alert, dark-eyed faces of children who looked old enough to be out of the infant stage, but not yet old enough for school. And in the booth itself, a 3rd child was standing on the seat, clutching the back cushion, and announcing something important to Elena, in a voice that carried above the restaurant noise. Sebastian could not hear the words. He could hear nothing at all. Because the child standing in the booth, the one with the dark hair and the precise set of the jaw and the way of standing with both feet planted, like he was prepared to argue his position, that child looked at Sebastian across the length of the restaurant with large dark eyes that Sebastian had seen in a mirror every morning for 36 years. The walls of Sebastian Thorne's chest cracked open. He did not move. He could not move. He was 36 years old and worth $3 billion, and he had negotiated with foreign governments and dismantled corporate boards and survived a hostile takeover that would have broken most men twice his age. And he was standing in the doorway of a small restaurant in Lower Manhattan, completely unable to take a single step. Elena turned. Their eyes met. The color left her face so completely and so instantly that Sebastian took an involuntary step forward, some old instinct firing she was going to faint. She needed, and then she didn't faint. Elena Sanchez had never fainted in her life. Instead, she did something that hit Sebastian harder than any reaction he could have anticipated. She grabbed the handle of the triple stroller with both hands and took a step backward, positioning herself between it and him, like an animal stepping between a predator and its young. That single movement answered the question Sebastian hadn't even known he was asking. He crossed the restaurant. He was not aware of the noise around him dropping, of the other patrons looking up, of the hostess moving to intercept him, and then thinking better of it when she saw his face. He was aware only of Elena and the stroller and the child in the booth who had stopped talking and was now watching him with those impossible familiar eyes. Elena. His voice came out rougher than he intended. Lower. He stopped 2 feet away from her and close enough to see that her hands were white-knuckled on the stroller handle and her jaw was set. In that way he remembered the way she looked when she had made a decision and was prepared to hold it against the weight of the entire world. Sebastian. Her voice was level. Careful. The voice of someone who had rehearsed this moment, he realized. Not recently, she had rehearsed it years ago, had prepared for it, and then prayed it would never come. He looked at the stroller. 2 children stared back at him with round, curious eyes. One of them had Sebastian's exact jaw. The other had Elena's nose and Sebastian's forehead, a collision of genetics so obvious it was almost architectural. He looked at the child in the booth, who had the whole of Sebastian's face in miniature, currently wearing an expression that was pure, Elena wary, watchful, more perceptive than any child that age should probably be. How old? Sebastian said. Not a question. A detonation. Elena's chin lifted. Sebastian, how old are they? This is not the place. Elena. He said her name like a door closing. How old are my children? The word "my" landed in the space between them like a stone dropped into still water, and he watched the ripple move across her face. Surprise, then something complicated. Then that jaw set again, that terrible, steady determination. 4, she said quietly. They'll be 5 in February. February. Sebastian did the math without wanting to. Did it in the way his brain did everything automatically, instantly, brutally. February. 5 years old. Conceived, he stopped. He knew exactly when they had been conceived. He knew the month because it had been the last good month. The last month before the long slide into distance and silence, and then the divorce papers. She had been pregnant when she left him. She had been carrying his children when she signed those papers and walked out of his life. "You were pregnant." He could hear his own voice from a strange distance, the way you hear things when the blood is too loud in your ears. "When you left, you were already pregnant." Elena said nothing. "You were pregnant with my children and you didn't tell me." "Sebastian, please lower your voice." "You didn't tell me." His voice was not loud. That was the thing, it was very quiet, which was somehow worse for both of them. "You left, and you took—" He stopped, recalibrated, looked at the children who were all three watching him with that unsettling, unified attention. "What are their names?" Elena's breath caught. He saw it. "Their name's Elena." "Liam," she said after a moment. She nodded toward the booth, toward the dark-eyed boy who was watching Sebastian with the focused suspicion of someone much older. "Noah." One of the stroller children who had Sebastian's jaw and who was currently assessing him with the calm patience of a judge. And Chloe. The third child who chose this precise moment to grin at Sebastian with the total uncalculating openness of a person who had not yet learned to distrust, and that grin was so purely Elena that it hit Sebastian like a physical force. Liam, Noah, Chloe. His children had names. His children had names he had not given them, had not chosen, had not whispered over cribs or argued about with the impossible tenderness of new parents. His children had names and 4 years of birthdays and inside jokes he didn't know and favorite meals he hadn't cooked and first words he had not heard. "I need you to come outside with me," Sebastian said. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Elena. "I'm in the middle of lunch with my children, Sebastian, and I will not have this conversation in front of them." Her voice was still quiet, still level, and he hated how steady she was hated and admired it simultaneously the way he always had. "If you want to talk, and we will need to talk, I know that I have always known this day would come. Then you will sit down, you will order something, and you will be a calm and normal adult in front of 3 4-year-olds who do not know who you are, or you will leave. Those are your options." "Ah!" Sebastian stared at her. His lawyer could have him in family court before the end of the week. His resources were incomprehensible. He could bury her in legal proceedings that would take years and drain every resource she had. He could take these children, his children, from this restaurant to his penthouse with a single phone call, could demonstrate fitness and financial capacity that no court in the country could argue with. He knew all of this. And he also knew with a clarity that surprised him that he was not going to do any of it. Not in front of them. Not in front of those 3 faces that were watching him with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity, and one devastating, open-hearted smile. He pulled out the chair across from Elena's side of the booth. He sat down. There was a silence. Then Liam from the booth seat said with the directness of a child who has been raised to ask questions directly, "Who are you?" Sebastian looked at his son. "I'm an old friend," he said, "of your mom's." Liam considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "You made her upset." "Liam," Elena started. "He did," Liam said unapologetically. "Her face did the thing." "What thing?" Sebastian said before he could stop himself. "The thing where she's trying not to show something," Liam said. "She does it when she's sad or when she doesn't want us to worry. Her mouth goes like this." He demonstrated a precise and genuinely impressive impression of Elena's controlled expression. Elena closed her eyes briefly. Sebastian looked at his son. This boy who was 4 years old and could read his mother's face with more accuracy than most adults managed in a lifetime, who called out emotional concealment with the calm certainty of someone who had made it his business to pay attention. "I'm sorry," Sebastian said, "for upsetting her." Liam looked at him for another long moment. Then, apparently having completed his assessment, he picked up a piece of bread from the basket on the table, bit off a corner with great seriousness, and returned his attention to his meal. Noah in the stroller had not taken his eyes off Sebastian. He said nothing, but his stare was the kind that made adults self-conscious, the kind that saw things. Chloe said cheerfully, "Do you like bread?" "I do," Sebastian said. "It's really good here. Mama says it's magic bread." She offered him a piece with the generosity of someone for whom sharing is simply the obvious and correct thing to do. Sebastian took the bread. His hand was not entirely steady. He looked at Elena across the table. She was watching him with an expression he could not read, or rather could read too well. She was watching him with the face of someone who was terrified and braced, and also somewhere very deep and very carefully hidden, not entirely without hope. He knew that face. He had loved that face for 6 years. He would have recognized it in the dark underwater at the end of the world. "Elena," he said quietly. "Not here," she said, equally quiet. "Okay," he said, and somehow impossibly they ordered lunch. It was the strangest hour of Sebastian Thorne's adult life. He sat across from his ex-wife and beside 3 children who were his and who did not know it, and he ordered the lamb sandwich he used to order every time they came here, and he ate it, and Elena fed Chloe and Noah from the stroller tray, and negotiated Liam's ongoing position that he should be allowed to have 2 desserts on the grounds that he had eaten all his vegetables. "That was the deal," Liam said reasonably. "You said if I ate all my vegetables, I could have dessert." "1 dessert," Elena said. "You didn't say 1. "I implied 1. You implied I could have dessert. You did not specify a quantity." Sebastian pressed his fist briefly to his mouth to conceal an involuntary reaction that was almost a smile. Elena caught his eye across the table, and something flickered in her expression, something painful and complicated, the memory of a shared amusement that neither of them had the right to feel right now. "He gets that from you," she said quietly. "The arguing." "My negotiation skills are worth $3 billion, Sebastian said, equally quiet. "To him they're worth a second cookie, so I'd say he's ahead of you on efficiency." It was the most human exchange they had managed, and it lasted approximately 4 seconds before Elena pulled her gaze away and the wall went back up, and Sebastian remembered that they were not 2 people sharing a small joke about their son over lunch. They were 2 people with 5 years of silence and secrets and a reckoning that had barely begun between them. After lunch, Elena paid. Sebastian reached for the check, and she put her hand over it with a flat look that he recognized as non-negotiable, and began the complex operation of extracting 3 children and a triple stroller from a restaurant booth. Sebastian watched, and then, without thinking about it, stood and moved to hold the stroller steady while she unfolded it. Their hands were close on the handle for 1 moment. Neither of them said anything. Outside on the sidewalk, the October air had sharpened. Chloe demanded to be picked up, and Elena hoisted her to her hip with the automatic ease of someone who has done this 10,000 times. Liam and Noah stood beside the stroller with the patient readiness of children who knew the drill of departures. Sebastian stood on the sidewalk and looked at Elena and could not find the beginning of what needed to be said. "Where do you live?" he asked. "Sebastian, I'm not asking so I can show up. I'm asking because..." He stopped. "Because what?" Because he needed to know they were safe. Because he needed to be able to picture it, the place where his children slept and woke and grew up in his absence. Because I need to understand how much I've missed. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Chloe was patting Elena's face with the absent-minded affection of a child comfortable in a parent's arms. Liam was watching the exchange with his disconcerting attention. Noah was looking at Sebastian with something that was not quite suspicion and not quite openness, something carefully in between. 17 blocks north, Elena said finally. "We've been there since they were 8 months old." 17 blocks. For 4 years, Sebastian had been 17 blocks from his children. He had walked past this restaurant 100 times in the years since the divorce, always on the other side of the street, never stopping, never looking. He had probably been 17 blocks from his children 100 times without knowing it. "I'm going to call my lawyer," he said. Elena's body went rigid. "Not," he held up his hand, "not for what you're thinking. I need a paternity test. I need legal documentation. Not because I doubt..." He looked at Liam, at Noah, at the specific mathematical certainty of their faces. "I don't doubt. I need the legal record because whatever comes next needs to be built on something real." Elena stared at him. "And what comes next, Sebastian? What do you think comes next?" "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I know it involves being in their lives. It has to." "You don't get to just decide that." "Elena." His voice was very even, very controlled, and she heard what was underneath the control, not anger, not threat, something more dangerous than either. Certainty. I have missed 4 years. I will not miss one more day than I am legally required to. I want to do this right. I want to do this in a way that doesn't hurt them. But I will do it." Elena looked at him for a long time. "Thursday," she said finally. "You can come Thursday, to meet them properly. An hour. My apartment, my rules." "Agreed." "And Sebastian." She shifted Chloe to her other hip and met his eyes with something very direct. "Before Thursday, you need to be very sure about the kind of man you're going to be for them. Because they don't need a billionaire, they don't need a penthouse or a private school or any of that. They need a father who shows up. And the moment you stop showing up, the moment you decide your empire is more important than a Tuesday afternoon at their school, I will fight you with everything I have. I have been fighting for these kids for 4 years and I will not stop." Sebastian thought about the board meeting he had walked out of 2 hours ago, about the 11 subsequent meetings his assistant had frantically texted him about the Singapore delegation and the foundation dinner and the relentless, inescapable machinery of his professional life. He thought about a small boy who had read his mother's hidden grief with the precision of a surgeon and called it out without hesitation. I thought about a girl who had offered a stranger a piece of bread with the complete unself-conscious generosity of someone who had been raised to believe that sharing was simply what you did. He thought about a second boy who had watched him across a restaurant table for an entire hour, with careful, patient, ancient-seeming eyes, reserving judgment, gathering information in no particular hurry about either. I thought about 17 blocks, about 4 years, about February birthdays he had not known to celebrate. "I'll be there Thursday," he said. Elena nodded once. Then she turned the stroller north and began walking, and his children walked beside her. Liam with his hands in his pockets and his head slightly bowed in thought, Noah with his careful eyes forward, Chloe craning her neck back over Elena's shoulder to look at Sebastian with one more open, unguarded smile. He stood on the sidewalk and watched them until they rounded the corner and were gone. Then he took out his phone and called Marcus. "Clear Thursday," he said. "Mr. Thorne, the Singapore delegation. Clear Thursday, Marcus. And get me Dr. Sarah Chen at Meridian Medical. I need to talk to a family law attorney before end of day. Not Harper, his usual corporate lawyer, someone who specializes in family and paternity." There was a silence on the other end of the phone. "Is everything all right, sir?" Sebastian looked at the corner where Elena had disappeared. At the ordinary Tuesday sidewalk, where the entire geography of his life had just shifted 3 degrees on its axis. "No," he said, "but it's going to be." He hung up. He stood there for another moment on the sidewalk outside the Olive Branch Bistro, and for the first time in 5 years, Sebastian Thorne felt something that was not emptiness. It was not happiness. It was not resolution. It was something rawer and more complicated than either the particular pain of a man who has finally understood the size of what he lost, and is only just beginning to understand the size of what might still barely, impossibly be recovered. He started walking, not back to the tower, not to any meeting or obligation or appointment. He walked 17 blocks north, and he found the street, found the building an ordinary brownstone with window boxes and a buzzer panel beside the door, and he stood on the opposite sidewalk and looked at it for a long time. Somewhere up in those floors, 3 children with his eyes were eating lunch and doing whatever 4-year-olds did in the afternoon. Living a life he had not known existed. Becoming people he had not had the privilege of watching become. His phone had 57 unread messages. He did not look at it. He stood on the sidewalk and he watched the building, the way he had never watched anything in his life, not a market chart, not a contract, not the face of an adversary across a negotiating table. He watched it the way you watch something you are only beginning to understand the value of something you had and lost without knowing you had it, something that is going to cost you more to recover than anything you have ever purchased and is worth every cent. Thursday, he thought. He turned and walked back downtown. He had calls to make, legal arrangements to begin, a paternity test to request not, because he doubted the children's origins for a single second, but because he needed the documented legal incontrovertible record that would allow him to fight in any court in any jurisdiction for the right to be present in the lives of Liam and Noah and Chloe Thorne. Because they would be Thorne. He had not said that yet. He would not say it to Elena on a sidewalk on the first day. but the decision was already made quietly and completely, the way Sebastian Thorne made the decisions that mattered, not loudly, not with fanfare, but with the total and unshakable certainty of a man who has identified what he wants and has made peace with the cost of obtaining it. He was going to be their father. I was going to figure out, however long it took and however much it cost him, what that meant and how to do it. And whatever had kept them from him, whatever chain of events and choices and failures had led to 5 years of absence, he was going to understand every inch of it. Every cause, every decision, every moment where the path could have gone differently and didn't. He owed his children that much. He owed Elena that much. And somewhere underneath the anger and the grief and the shock of the afternoon, underneath all of it was a question he had not yet let himself ask directly, because the answer, whatever it was going to change everything. Why had Elena left? Not the official answer, not the irreconcilable differences of the legal paperwork. He knew Elena. He had known Elena in the way that you know someone when you have shared a bed and a dream and an ordinary daily life with them for years. And Elena Sanchez, whatever her faults, was not the kind of woman who walked away. She was the kind of woman who stood and fought for things, who held on past the point where other people would have let go, who would have moved mountains with her bare hands before she would have abandoned something she believed in. She had believed in them. He was sure of that. He had been careless with her belief, had taken it for granted, the way you take for granted anything that seems permanent, but he had never doubted the belief itself. So why had she left? Sebastian Thorne walked back toward his tower through the October afternoon, with his phone still unanswered and his calendar in ruins, and something cold and precise beginning to form at the back of his mind. Not yet a conclusion, not yet an accusation, but the shape of a question that would not let him rest until he had pursued it all the way to its answer. Whatever that answer turned out to be, he had the feeling it was going to be devastating. He had the feeling it was going to change not just his future, but his understanding of the past 5 years, every single day of them, every assumption he had lived by, every piece of the story he had told himself about why his marriage had ended and who was responsible and what was true. He had the feeling that the ground was not done shifting, but Thursday was coming. And for the first time in 5 years, Sebastian Thorne had somewhere to be that mattered more than anything else on earth. Thursday came faster than Sebastian expected, and slower than he could stand. In the 48 hours between the restaurant and the moment he stood outside Elena's building with his hand raised to buzz, apartment 4C, Sebastian had not slept more than 3 hours total. He had sat in his penthouse in the dark, in the particular silence of a man whose mind refuses to stop running the same calculations over and over, arriving at the same impossible number every time. 4 years. 48 months, roughly 1,400 days of birthdays and fevers and first words and scraped knees and bedtime stories and all the 10,000 ordinary moments that constitute a childhood, 1,400 days that belonged to him and had been lived without him. He pressed the buzzer. There was a long pause, long enough that he wondered if she had changed her mind, if she was standing on the other side of the door, deciding whether to let him in or whether the risk was still too great. Then the intercom crackled. "Second floor landing," Elena's voice said. Flat, careful. "I'll meet you there." She was waiting at the top of the stairs when he came up. She had the door to the apartment pulled almost closed behind her, and he understood immediately she wanted to talk to him alone. First, wanted to establish the terms before she let him across the threshold into the space where her children lived. Their children. "Before you come in," she said, "we need to agree on some things." "Okay. They don't know who you are. I told them you're a friend from a long time ago who's going to visit. Nothing more. You don't tell them anything about being their father until we have talked, until we have a plan, until I am satisfied that you are serious and stable enough to handle that conversation without damaging them. Are we agreed?" "Yes." She studied him. "You hired a family lawyer?" "Yes." "Amanda Reyes called me yesterday. She said you're filing for a paternity acknowledgement and want to discuss a custody arrangement. I told her to make first contact before filing anything. I didn't want you blindsided." Elena was quiet for a moment. He could see her recalibrating, adjusting for the fact that he had handled it with more consideration than she had expected. "The paternity test," she said. "I've arranged it for Monday. Non-invasive private lab results in 72 hours. My lawyer will share them with yours simultaneously." He paused. "I know they're mine, Elena. The test is for the legal record, not for me." Something moved across her face, something she controlled immediately. 1 hour, she said. If it goes well, maybe a little longer. If any of them get upset or uncomfortable, you leave immediately. No argument. Understood. She opened the door. The apartment was small and warm and absolutely alive. That was the first thing that hit him, the aliveness of it, the density of presence that 3 small children create in a space, the toys on the floor, and the drawings on the refrigerator, and the smell of something baking, and the sound of a television in another room playing something animated at a volume calibrated to the hearing preferences of the under 5 demographic. Sebastian stood in the entrance and absorbed it all and felt something in his chest, do something he had no vocabulary for. Liam appeared first, coming out of the hallway, with the confident stride of a child who owns the space he moves through. He stopped when he saw Sebastian, and that focused, assessing look came back immediately, the look Sebastian had been thinking about for 2 days. "You came back," Liam said. "I said I would." Liam appeared to consider whether this was sufficient. "Mama said you're her friend." "That's right?" "From a long time ago." "Yes." "How long ago?" Sebastian glanced at Elena, who gave him nothing. "Before you were born," Sebastian said. Liam processed this. "That is a long time," he agreed seriously. Then he turned and went back down the hallway, apparently satisfied, and shouted, "Noah, Chloe, Mama's friend is here." The next 10 minutes were chaos, in the specific joyful way that is unique to households containing small children. Chloe came running and immediately wanted to show Sebastian a drawing she had made of their cat, a creature named Biscuit, who became visible a moment later, an enormous orange tabby who walked directly onto Sebastian's feet and sat down with the total confidence of an animal who has never once been told no. Noah came last, as Sebastian was already learning he always came last, taking his time observing from the hallway before he committed to entering the room. Sebastian sat on the couch. Biscuit remained on his feet. Chloe showed him 14 drawings in sequence, narrating each one with the thoroughness of a museum curator. Liam challenged him to identify the current world record for the longest Lego tower, a question Sebastian did not know the answer to, and admitted freely, which seemed to increase rather than decrease Liam's estimation of him. And Noah sat in the armchair across the room and watched, quiet and patient, and Sebastian felt that watching the way you feel a camera, not uncomfortable exactly, but aware. Elena made coffee. She moved in and out of the room, and each time she passed, Sebastian caught her eyes for a half second, checking him, measuring, looking for the signs she was afraid she would find. The signs that this was performance, that the warmth he was extending to her children was calculated, that behind the attentiveness there was the cold architecture of a man who wanted to win something. I understood why she was looking. He did not resent it. If their positions were reversed, if he had spent 4 years protecting 3 children alone, and the other parent had suddenly reappeared with the resources of a small nation at his disposal, he would have been doing the same thing and doing it harder. After 40 minutes, Noah spoke. He had not said a single word since Sebastian arrived, had simply watched from the armchair, with Biscuit's secondary allegiance. The cat had migrated to Noah's lap, somewhere around the 14th drawing, and Sebastian had not pushed him, had directed nothing at him, directly had simply let him exist on his own terms in his own time. "Do you know how to fix things?" Noah asked. Sebastian looked at him directly. "What kind of things?" "Liam's remote control car. The wheel came off and Mama tried to fix it, but the piece is really small and she said her fingers are too big." He said this without any implication that Elena had failed, just a neutral reportage of fact. "I can try," Sebastian said. Noah got up from the armchair, disappeared down the hallway, and came back with a small red remote control car and a wheel that had separated from its axle. He handed both to Sebastian and then sat on the couch next to him, close, but not touching, and watched. Sebastian looked at the car. He had not fixed a toy in his life. He had in his lifetime overseen the reconstruction of a $300 million infrastructure project and negotiated the merger of 2 of the largest logistics companies in the country. He had no idea how toy wheel axles worked. He looked at it carefully. He turned it over. He identified the small plastic pin that needed to reseat into the wheel housing. He pressed it carefully with the pad of his thumb and felt it click. He handed the car back to Noah. Noah turned the wheel. It spun freely. He looked at Sebastian with those old, careful eyes, and something in them shifted. Not warmth exactly, not yet, but the specific quality of a child who has updated his assessment of a person based on new data. "Thank you," Noah said. "You're welcome," Sebastian said. And that was the moment Elena, standing in the kitchen doorway with a coffee cup in both hands, turned away so neither of them could see her face. Sebastian stayed 2 hours and 15 minutes. He did not notice when the hour mark passed. He was on the floor building something architectural and increasingly unstable out of wooden blocks with Chloe, while Liam provided a running critique of the structural integrity, and Noah sat beside Sebastian, close now shoulder almost touching, operating the fixed remote control car along the perimeter of the block structure. When Elena finally said quietly, "Guys, it's getting close to dinner time," there was a chorus of protest that Sebastian felt land somewhere in the center of his chest like a fist. "Can he stay for dinner?" Chloe asked. "Not tonight, baby." "But why?" "Because he has things to do, but he can come again." Chloe turned to Sebastian with the absolute unfiltered directness of a 4-year-old. "Will you come again?" "Yes," Sebastian said. No hesitation. "Promise." He looked at her, this child with Elena's nose and his stubbornness and her mother's total inability to accept a non-answer, and he said, "I promise." At the door, Elena handed him his jacket, and they stood in the small entrance for a moment, with the noise of the children in the other room behind her and the stairwell behind him, and nothing between them but 5 years of silence that neither of them knew how to break cleanly. "They like you," Elena said. She sounded like this surprised her, and she hadn't decided yet how to feel about it. "Liam's reserving judgment." "Liam reserves judgment on everyone. He's been reserving judgment on our mailman for 2 years. She paused. "Noah fixed your car." "Noah supervised while I fixed the car. There's a difference." Something crossed Elena's face that was so close to a smile it hurt to look at. Then it was gone. "Sebastian, the lawyer, I want this to be civil. I don't want a war." "Neither do I." "Then we need to go slowly. For them." "I know. And you need to understand." She stopped, started again. "The decisions I made. I had reasons. I know you're angry. I know you think—" "I don't know what I think yet," he said honestly. "That's the truth. I'm not ready to have that conversation, but I know I need to have it." He met her eyes. "Soon." Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once and stepped back and closed the door. Sebastian stood on the landing for a moment before he went down the stairs. He had been a father for 2 hours and 15 minutes, officially in practice in the actual tactile reality of being in the same room as his children and letting them exist around him. And the thing that hit him hardest walking back down to the street was not the weight of what he had missed. It was the terrifying, exhilarating, completely disorienting fact that he had not wanted to leave. Sebastian Thorne had never in his adult life not wanted to leave somewhere. He always wanted to leave. He had wanted to leave dinner parties and charity galas and vacations and his own birthday celebrations. He was a man who moved through spaces, not a man who inhabited them. Elena had known that about him and had loved him anyway, and he had never understood until this moment, standing on a sidewalk in the October dark, what that had actually cost her. His phone rang. Marcus. "The Singapore delegation rescheduled for Monday, but Mr. Thorne, your mother, has called 4 times today. She says it's urgent." "Tell her I'll call her tomorrow." "She said you said that yesterday." "Then tell her I mean it more this time." He hung up and kept walking and did not call his mother. He should have. Later he would understand that he should have called her that night, should have confronted her immediately with the questions that were already forming, should not have let another day pass. But he did not know yet what he was going to find. He only knew the shape of it, the outline of a wrong that was larger than he had let himself believe. The paternity results came back the following Thursday. Sebastian was in his office when his lawyer called. He was sitting behind his desk for the first time in days, attempting to attend to the needs of his empire, and he had been staring at the same contract for 40 minutes when his phone rang. "It's confirmed," Amanda Reyes said. 99.998%. All 3. Sebastian set the phone down on his desk without ending the call and sat very still for approximately 30 seconds. Then he picked it up again. "File the acknowledgement of paternity," he said, "and set up the custody meeting for next week. Elena's lawyer, first nothing adversarial. I want a collaborative arrangement." "Understood. And Mr. Thorne, congratulations." He did not know what to say to that. He said nothing and thanked her and ended the call. He did not go back to the contract. He opened his desk drawer and took out the photograph he had put there 3 days ago. The only photograph he had of Elena and himself together, which his assistant had found in the archived files of his old apartment. They were at a restaurant, not the Olive Branch, but somewhere else, somewhere earlier, and they were laughing at something, both of them, with the total unself-conscious joy of people who do not know they are being photographed. Elena had her hand on his arm. He looked younger. He looked happy in a way that he did not recognize in himself anymore. He put the photograph away. He called his mother. Margaret Thorne answered on the second ring, which meant she had been waiting. "Sebastian, finally. I've been trying to reach you for days." "I know. Marcus says you've been canceling everything. The foundation dinner, the Singapore." "Mother." His voice was very quiet. The particular quiet that in a board meeting meant someone was about to lose something. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly." A beat of silence. Slight. Barely perceptible. But Sebastian had been reading silences in negotiating rooms for 15 years, and he heard it. "Of course," Margaret said. "When Elena and I divorced, the grounds were irreconcilable differences, but Elena left very suddenly, faster than made sense for someone who," he stopped, chose the words deliberately, "someone who was not the leaving kind. I always found that strange. I told myself it was my fault, my hours, my distance, but I never quite believed it entirely. And now I'm wondering if there was something else." Another silence. Longer. "Sebastian, that was 5 years ago. Whatever reasons Elena had." "Did you have any contact with Elena before she filed?" he said. "Any contact at all, during that last year?" "I don't see why." "Mother, yes or no?" The silence this time was the longest yet, and in that silence something in Sebastian's chest went very cold and very still, the way water goes still just before it freezes. "We spoke a few times," Margaret said finally. "She came to me, actually. She was concerned about the hours you were keeping, about the direction." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth, that you were building something important, and that—" "What did you tell her?" Not a question. Not anymore. Margaret's voice shifted. Barely. A degree of temperature. "I told her that a man like you needs a particular kind of partner, and that I wasn't sure she was—" "What did you tell her?" Sebastian said for the third time, and his voice was so quiet now that Margaret stopped talking entirely. The silence stretched between them across the phone line for a long, long time. "She wasn't right for you," Margaret said finally. Her voice had changed completely now. The careful maternal warmth had dropped away, and what was underneath was harder and more honest and infinitely colder. "She was a distraction, Sebastian. You were 30 years old, and you were throwing away your potential on a girl with debt and no connections and no—" "What did you do?" Sebastian said it the way you say things when you already know the answer and are giving the other person one final chance to tell you the truth before you find it yourself. "I protected you," Margaret said, "the way I have always—" "What did you do?" And Margaret Thorne, who had built a career on knowing exactly when a position was indefensible, said nothing. In that nothing, Sebastian heard everything. He stood up from his desk. He was not aware of standing. He was aware of the window in front of him, the city 47 floors below, the way the light looked very sharp and very clear and very cold. "She was pregnant," he said. "When she left, she was pregnant with my children, and you knew. Sebastian, you knew, and you did something. I don't know yet what you did, but I know you did something because Elena Sanchez does not leave. That is not who she is. She does not walk away from people she loves. She stays and she fights and she holds on, and the only thing in the world that would have made her sign those papers and disappear was if someone gave her a reason to believe that staying would be worse than leaving." His voice was shaking now, slightly, barely, the first time it had shaken in more than a decade. "What did you give her, Mother? What did you show her? What did you make her believe?" Margaret said very quietly, "It was necessary." The world went white. Not literally, but Sebastian Thorne had in his life been angry many times, the cold, contained, tactical anger of a man who uses emotion as fuel rather than expression. He had never in his adult life felt what moved through him in that moment. It was not the contained kind. It was something ancient and total and without edges. "It was necessary," he repeated, slowly, like he was tasting each word and finding it poisonous. "My wife, my children, 1,400 days of their lives, you decided that was necessary. You would have stayed with her out of obligation. You would have built your life around, "They are my children." His voice cracked on the last word just slightly, just enough that both of them heard it, and neither of them acknowledged it. "They are 4 years old. They have never met me." Liam has spent 4 years watching his mother hold everything together alone. Noah fixes things quietly because he's learned that's how you survive. Chloe gives bread to strangers because she was raised by someone generous enough to give everything she has and ask for nothing. He stopped, breathed. "And I didn't know. For 4 years I didn't know because you decided I didn't need to." "Sebastian, please listen. Don't call me," he said. "Don't call Marcus. Don't come to my office. Don't contact Elena. Don't contact my children." He stopped again. "My children. I have to say that to you. Stay away from my children. Do you understand how wrong this world has gone that I have to say that to their grandmother?" He ended the call. He stood at the window for a long time. Then he sat down on the floor, not in a chair. On the floor with his back against the desk in his $3,000 suit in the office of the 47th floor of Thorn Tower, and he put his head back against the wood and closed his eyes. His assistant knocked 20 minutes later. "Mr. Thorn, your 4 o'clock is—" "Cancel it," Sebastian said from the floor. A pause. "Sir, are you—" "I'm fine, Marcus. Cancel it. Cancel everything today." Another pause. Then very carefully, "Can I get you anything?" Sebastian thought about Elena, who had been 29 years old and pregnant, and had been handed whatever his mother had fabricated, evidence, emails, testimony, whatever particular cruelty Margaret had deployed, and had made the decision to leave and raise 3 children alone, rather than fight a woman with the resources of the Thorn family. He thought about what kind of thing you would have to be shown to make that choice. He thought about how frightened she must have been, and how alone, and how she had done it anyway, had built a life anyway, had raised 3 extraordinary children anyway, with 0 support and 0 help from the man who should have been standing beside her. "No," he said. "Thank you, Marcus." He stayed on the floor until the sky outside the window went dark. Then he got up, put on his jacket, and drove 17 blocks north. He did not call ahead. He knew he should call ahead. He stood on the sidewalk outside Elena's building and looked up at the lit windows of the 4th floor and took out his phone and put it away again 3 times. Then he buzzed apartment 4C. Elena's voice came through the intercom after a moment, slightly wary. "Sebastian, it's almost 8. The kids are—" "I know," he said. "I'm not here for the kids. I need to talk to you tonight. Please." A long pause. Long enough that he counted his own heartbeats and got to 11 before the door buzzed open. She met him at the apartment door this time. The kids were in bed. He could hear the specific silence of an apartment containing sleeping children, which he was already learning was different from the silence of an empty space. She was in a sweater and her hair was down, and she looked tired in the way of someone who has been tired for years and has simply made peace with it. She looked at his face, and her own face changed. "What happened?" she said. Not a question. "I talked to my mother tonight." Elena went very still. "Tell me what she did," Sebastian said. "I need to hear it from you, all of it." Elena looked at him for a long time. He could see her deciding, weighing the risk of opening this against the weight of having carried it alone for 5 years, measuring the cost of telling him against the cost of continuing to protect him from a truth he was already halfway to. "Come in," she said finally. She closed the door behind him. In the kitchen, she poured 2 glasses of water, not wine, not coffee, just water, the drink of people who need to be entirely clear-headed for what comes next. She set one in front of him and kept one in her hands and stood at the counter and did not sit down. "She came to me when I was 9 weeks pregnant," Elena said. "I hadn't told you yet. I was planning to that weekend. I had it planned out. She stopped. She knew somehow. I don't know how she found out, but she knew." Sebastian said nothing. Listened. "She showed me emails that looked like they were from you, from your account to a woman I didn't know. They were detailed, specific, the kind of specific that you can't fake if you don't know someone. She had photographs. She had what looked like records of transactions, hotel stays. She had—" Elena's voice was very steady, which he recognized as her managing emotion with great precision. "She had a letter, in your handwriting or what looked like your handwriting, that said you had never intended the marriage to be permanent, that you had married me because it was easier than ending things, and that you were waiting for the right moment." Sebastian closed his eyes. "She told me," Elena continued, that if I fought it, if I stayed and tried to confront you or contest any of it, she would use her lawyers to ensure I got nothing. No settlement, no support. She would make the divorce so expensive and so protracted that by the end of it, I would have nothing left. She paused. I was 9 weeks pregnant. I had student debt. I was working 2 jobs. And I was sitting across from a woman who had the resources to make that threat real. She stopped talking. Sebastian opened his eyes. So you left, he said. So I left, she said. I left, and I decided that I could raise the baby alone. I didn't know there were 3 yet. I found that out at 12 weeks, and that no child of mine was going to grow up in the middle of a war with those resources on the other side. She met his eyes. I made the best decision I could with the information I had, which was false, which I now know was false, but I didn't know that. Sebastian sat with this for a moment. The whole architecture of the last 5 years rearranging itself around a new truth. Every assumption he had built about why she left, about what their marriage had been, about his own failures and her decisions crumbling and reforming into something that looked nothing like what he had believed. I owe you an apology, he said. Elena blinked. You didn't know. Not for what my mother did, for what I did, before any of that. You were working 2 jobs and I was working 20 hours a day, and I told myself you understood that you were patient, that there would be more time. I didn't give you more time. I gave you absence and called it ambition. He looked at his hands. Even if none of the rest had happened, I was failing you. The rest just gave you an exit through a door I had already cracked open. The kitchen was very quiet. Elena set her glass of water down on the counter. She looked at him with an expression he had not seen on her face since before the marriage ended. Not love, not yet nothing. So simple as that, but the specific look of a woman who is hearing the thing she needed to hear and is trying very hard not to let that change everything instantaneously because she knows better, because she has been burned, because she is smarter now than she was at 29, and she knows that words are not the same thing as change. The kids have a routine, she said finally. Saturday mornings, pancakes, then the park. You could come Saturday, not as a visitor, as someone who's learning the routine. Sebastian looked at her. Not as their father, she said. Not yet, but as someone who's figuring out how to be in their lives without blowing it up. If you can commit to the ordinary Saturdays, to the pancakes and the park and the boring normal parts, then we can talk about what comes next. I'll be here Saturday, he said. 7:37, she said. Because Chloe is up at 6:30 no matter what anyone does about it, and by 7, the pancake negotiation has already started. Sebastian stood to leave. At the door he stopped. The letter, he said, the one in my handwriting. I kept it, Elena said quietly. I kept everything she gave me. It's in a folder in the back of my closet. I kept it because I thought one day you might need to see it. He looked at her. You kept it. I'm a Dr. Sebastian. I keep records, even the ones that break my heart. He stood in the doorway of the apartment where his children slept and looked at this woman who had been handed a fabricated destruction of everything they had built and had survived it, had protected 3 children through it, had kept the evidence of it for 5 years without ever using it as a weapon. And he thought, I have never deserved you. He did not say it. It was too large and too raw and too early for that kind of truth. But he thought it standing in her doorway, and it settled into him the way only things that are entirely true ever do, not like a revelation, but like a recognition, like something you have always known, finally saying its name out loud. Good night, Elena, he said. Good night, she said. I went down the stairs and out into the November night, and somewhere above him in a small, warm apartment, 3 children who were his slept without knowing it, dreaming whatever 4-year-olds dream. And somewhere in the back of a closet was a folder full of lies that had cost all of them 5 years. He was going to make his mother answer for every single day of it. But first Saturday. Pancakes. The park. One ordinary morning at a time. Saturday came and Sebastian Thorne showed up at 7 o'clock exactly. He had been awake since 4:30. He had stood in his closet for 20 minutes, which was 20 minutes longer than he had ever stood in a closet in his life, because every suit he owned was the wrong thing, and he did not own anything that was not a suit or workout gear, and he had finally put on dark jeans and a simple gray sweater that his stylist had purchased for him 2 years ago, and that still had the tag attached. He cut the tag off with his keys in the elevator going down. He brought nothing. He had almost brought flowers, had stood in front of a bodega on the corner at 6:55 with a bunch of orange tulips in his hand before putting them back because flowers were for a date. And this was not a date. This was pancakes in a park, and he was a man trying to learn a routine, not a man trying to impress anyone. He arrived at the door with nothing but himself, which was both the simplest and the most terrifying thing he had brought anywhere in years. Elena opened the door before he could knock, which meant she had heard him on the stairs, which meant she had been listening. From somewhere behind her, Chloe's voice, "Is it him? Is it the friend?" "Yes," Elena called back, not taking her eyes off Sebastian. She looked him up and down once, taking in the jeans, and something in her expression shifted by one small degree. Not warmth, recognition. She stepped back. "Come in. Fair warning, Liam has already decided you're on his team for the pancake topping debate, and Noah is in the middle of a feelings about the syrup bottle that I don't fully understand yet." Sebastian walked in. The apartment on a Saturday morning was a different country than the apartment on a Thursday evening. The energy was horizontal rather than vertical, spread everywhere, low to the ground, radiating from three small people who were in three different states of Saturday morning existence. Chloe was entirely ready for the day dress, shoes already on, sitting at the kitchen table with the focused impatience of someone who has been waiting for the activity to start for what felt to her like several decades. Liam was at the counter in pajamas, making the case for chocolate chips in the pancake batter, with the rhetorical commitment of a man who has prepared for this argument. Noah was sitting on the kitchen floor, not in distress, but also not in distress, holding the syrup bottle and examining it in the particular way he examined things, deeply, quietly, as though he could solve it through sustained attention. "The bottle is sticky," Noah said without looking up, as though this explained everything, and to Noah it clearly did. "We can wash it," Sebastian said. Noah looked up at him. "I told Mama that." "And," Sebastian said, "she said after pancakes." "That seems reasonable." Noah considered this. "It's sticky now, though." Sebastian crouched down to Noah's level. "Can I see it?" Noah handed the bottle over with the solemnity of a person transferring a difficult responsibility. Sebastian turned it over, found the seam of dried syrup around the cap, and carried it to the sink, where he ran warm water over it and dried it with a paper towel and handed it back. The whole process took 45 seconds. Noah held the bottle, turned it. The stickiness was gone. He looked at Sebastian with the measured approval he gave to solutions that actually worked. "Thank you," Noah said. He got up from the floor and put the bottle on the table and climbed into his chair, apparently satisfied that the day could now proceed. Liam, watching this from the counter, said, "He does that, fixates on things." "I know," Sebastian said. Liam squinted at him. "How do you know?" Sebastian paused. "Your mom mentioned it." Liam accepted this and returned to his argument about chocolate chips. Elena was watching Sebastian from across the kitchen with an expression she was not entirely managing to keep neutral. He caught her eye. She looked away first, which was unusual enough that he noted it and said nothing. The pancake process took 40 minutes and produced a volume of batter-related chaos that Sebastian found completely bewilderingly absorbing. Liam won the chocolate chip argument by attrition. Chloe added strawberries without asking, and this was accepted as a fait accompli by everyone. Noah ate his plain, which he had apparently always done, and which Elena said was simply who Noah was, a person who believed in things as they were fundamentally intended. Sebastian ate his with strawberries and chocolate chips because Chloe had plated them for him personally and looked at him expectantly, and they were objectively excellent. "These are the best pancakes I've ever had," he said. Chloe beamed. "Mama makes them." "I know. She puts vanilla in the batter. That's the secret." "Chloe," Elena said without heat, "that's our secret." "He can know," Chloe said with absolute confidence. "He's nice." The table went briefly quiet in the way that tables go quiet when a child has said something that lands differently for the adults than it was meant to. Elena picked up her coffee cup. Sebastian looked at his plate. Liam, oblivious, requested a second pancake. After breakfast came the park, which involved the full logistical operation of coats and shoes and the triple stroller for the walk over, even though all three kids were insistent they could walk, and Elena's counterposition that the stroller was for the return trip when they would be tired and would claim they could walk right up until the moment they couldn't, which Sebastian gathered from the way she said it was a pattern with a long history. He pushed the stroller. He did not offer to. He simply moved to it as Elena was getting the kids into their coats, positioned his hands on the handle, and when Elena came out of the entrance behind him with all 3 children organized around her, she looked at the stroller and then at him and said nothing, which he was learning was Elena's version of acceptance. The park was 3 blocks away, which was a 10-minute journey with 3 4-year-olds who needed to examine everything. A pigeon, a crack in the sidewalk, a delivery truck that Liam needed to determine the contents of, a dog on a leash belonging to an elderly man who stopped entirely so all 3 children could pet it, and Sebastian stood holding the stroller and watched Elena crouch down beside them to talk to the dog, and something happened in his chest that he had no category for. I had made billions of dollars and had never once, not once, stood on a sidewalk on a Saturday morning watching 3 children pet a stranger's dog, and he could not have explained to anyone, including himself, why this felt like more than any of it. At the park, the kids dispersed immediately in 3 directions, with the synchronized chaos of people who have been here before and know exactly where they are going. Liam to the climbing structure, Chloe to the sandbox, Noah to the bench near the pond where he sat and appeared to be observing the ducks with the focused attention he gave everything. Sebastian started toward the climbing structure, and Elena said quietly from beside him, "Noah." He turned, looked at where Noah was sitting alone by the pond. "He always does that," Elena said. "He likes to watch before he joins, but sometimes he likes company while he's watching if the company is quiet." Sebastian changed direction. He walked to the bench and sat beside Noah, leaving a foot of space between them, and looked at the ducks. They sat for several minutes in complete silence. It was not uncomfortable. It was the specific, particular silence of 2 people who are constitutionally suited to quiet, and Sebastian felt it the way you feel something that fits with a recognition that was almost painful. "The one on the left is the boss," Noah said eventually. Sebastian looked. The duck on the left was indeed moving through the water with an authority that the others seemed to navigate around. "How can you tell?" "The other ones move when he gets close. Not because they're scared, because they know that's where he goes." Noah paused. "There's a difference." Sebastian looked at his son. "Yes," he said, "there is." Noah looked up at him, then directly with those eyes that had been assessing him since the first day in the apartment. "Are you going to keep coming?" he asked. The directness of it landed clean and hard. "Yes," Sebastian said. "Even when things are busy, Mama's friends sometimes say they're going to come, and then they're busy." "I'm going to come," Sebastian said, "even when things are busy." Noah looked at him for another moment. Then he nodded once the way Liam nodded when he had reached a verdict and returned his gaze to the ducks. After another minute he slid 3 inches along the bench toward Sebastian, closing the space between them to almost nothing. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Sebastian sat very still and did not move and did not speak, and was more present in that moment than he had been in any boardroom of his life. From across the park, Elena was watching them. He could feel it. When he finally looked over, she had already looked away. The following Saturday, Sebastian came at 7 again, and the Saturday after that, and the Saturday after that. By the 4th Saturday, Chloe had started running to the door when she heard his footsteps on the stairs. By the 5th, Liam had extended to him a provisional membership in what Liam called the Good People Club, the criteria for which remained somewhat opaque, but appeared to include being willing to argue Lego structural theory for 20 minutes without checking your phone. By the 6th Saturday, Noah had taken to saving Sebastian the chair next to his own at breakfast without being asked. Elena watched all of it. She watched it the way she watched Noah watch the ducks, gathering information, reserving judgment, waiting for the pattern to reveal itself clearly before she trusted what she saw. The pattern that revealed itself was this: Sebastian Thorne showed up. Every Saturday, without fail, without excuse, without the kind of last-minute cancellation that she had spent 6 years being offered in their marriage as a substitute for presence. He showed up, and he was entirely there when he arrived, phone in his pocket, attention undivided, willing to be on the floor or on the bench or at the pancake table for as long as it took. He was awkward sometimes. He did not always know the right thing to say. He misread Chloe's energy once and tried to engage her in a focused activity when what she needed was to be held, and he had looked at Elena with such genuine confusion that she had to tell him quietly, "Just pick her up." And the look on his face when he did, when Chloe simply settled against his shoulder and was immediately fine, was a look Elena filed away and did not examine too closely. How was learning? Visibly, honestly, without pretense. He was learning the way adults learn things that children make look effortless through repetition and mistake and correction, and the occasional humiliation of being outsmarted by a 4-year-old. Then came the Tuesday in the 4th week that he did not expect. His phone rang at 6:47 in the morning. Elena. He was in the car on the way to the office, and the fact that she was calling him rather than texting meant something was wrong before he even answered. "Noah has a fever," she said. 103. "I'm taking him to the pediatrician, but his regular doctor is out, and they're putting me with whoever's available at 9, and Liam and Chloe need to be at preschool at 8:30, and I don't have anyone to—" She stopped. He could hear her recalibrating, hear the particular exhaustion of a person who has been the only available adult for 4 years and has forgotten how to ask for help. "I can figure it out. I didn't know if you—" "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Sebastian said. "Sebastian, you don't have to—" Elena, quiet, certain. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. He told the driver to turn around. He called Marcus and said, 'Clear my morning.' And Marcus said, 'Sir, the meridian.' And Sebastian said, 'Clear it, Marcus,' and ended the call. He was at the apartment in 12 minutes. Elena opened the door, and she looked exactly like a person who had been up since 5 with a sick child and had been managing alone and had made one phone call she was still not sure about. Sebastian came in, and she pointed him toward Liam and Chloe's room without speaking, and he went. He got 2 4-year-olds dressed, fed, and out the door to preschool in 40 minutes. This sounds simple. It was not simple. Liam needed his specific blue socks, which were in the laundry, and Sebastian had to negotiate a ceasefire in which the dark blue socks were accepted as equivalent. Chloe could not find her left shoe for 8 minutes, which Sebastian finally located under the couch behind Biscuit, who appeared to have adopted it as a companion. The breakfast situation involved an egg that cracked wrong on the edge of the pan and needed to be replaced, and then a discussion about whether the replacement egg was the same egg that Sebastian handled by simply agreeing it was the same egg and moving forward. He walked them to preschool, 3 blocks. He held Chloe's hand because she reached for it without asking, and Liam walked beside him with his hands in his pockets, explaining a conflict that had occurred earlier in the week with a classmate named Marcus, who had taken his sticker without permission, and this remained an open grievance requiring acknowledgement. "That was wrong of him," Sebastian said. "I know," Liam said. "I told the teacher." "Good." She said to use my words. "Do you think your words worked?" Liam considered. "Not yet, but I have more words." Sebastian pressed his fist to his mouth briefly. "That's the right approach." At the preschool door, Chloe threw her arms around Sebastian's legs without warning, the full-body hug of a child who gives affection with the wholeness of someone who has never been told to hold back. Sebastian crouched down and hugged her back, and she pulled away beaming and ran inside, and Liam said with more dignity, "Bye," and followed her. Sebastian stood on the preschool sidewalk for a moment after the door closed. He took out his phone, put it away, stood there. Then he walked back to Elena's apartment, where Noah was lying on the couch in the specific inert misery of a feverish child, and Elena was on the phone with the pediatrician's office, trying to move the appointment earlier. Sebastian sat on the edge of the couch near Noah's feet, and Noah, without opening his eyes, shifted his legs to make room and then settled them against Sebastian's side, using him as an anchor point, and Sebastian sat very still and let him. The pediatrician saw Noah at 9:15. Viral infection, nothing bacterial, fever management, and rest and fluids. Elena was handed a sheet of instructions she had probably memorized 3 years ago, and they walked home with Noah between them, one of his hands in Elena's, and one after a moment's pause in Sebastian's. The 3 of them walked back to the apartment, and it was so ordinary, so completely and devastatingly ordinary, that Sebastian had to keep his face very carefully controlled the entire way. Noah was asleep on the couch by 10. Elena was in the kitchen, and Sebastian came in and stood in the doorway, and she was standing at the counter with her back to him, and her shoulders were doing something he recognized the thing people's shoulders do when they are trying very hard not to cry and are almost succeeding. "Hey," he said quietly. She turned around. Her eyes were dry, her jaw was set, but he knew her face had known her face for 10 years, and he knew what was under the jaw. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I know. I would have figured it out." "I know that too." She looked at him. "It's different," she said. "Having someone, it's different. I forgot what it was like to have someone." She said it like an admission she hadn't intended to make, like something that had come out before she could stop it. Sebastian looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Tell me what to do. I'll make the coffee, I'll do the laundry, I'll sit with him while he sleeps. Tell me what needs to happen today, and I'll do it." Elena stared at him. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not today." She looked at him for a long time, and he could see her calculating the risk of it, the terrible arithmetic of allowing herself to depend on someone who had once already not been there. He stood in the kitchen doorway, and he let her calculate. He did not hurry her, he did not add anything. "The laundry is in the bag by the bathroom," she said finally. "The colors and the whites are separate. Don't mix them." "Okay. And if Noah wakes up, he'll want water. Room temperature, not cold, cold water makes him feel worse. Got it. And don't—" She stopped, started again. "Don't let Biscuit on the couch with him. He'll want Biscuit there, and I know it seems cruel to say no, but last time Noah was sick, he woke up with cat hair in his eye and cried for 20 minutes. "I'll guard the perimeter," Sebastian said. Something in Elena's face broke open just slightly, just for a second, that almost smile again, the painful flash of something that used to be easy and comfortable between them before time and distance and betrayal and loss. She turned back to the counter. "Thank you," she said with her back to him, "for coming." "I will always come," Sebastian said. "From now on, I need you to know that." She didn't answer, but she didn't tell him it wasn't true. I did the laundry. He sat with Noah. He guarded against Biscuit with moderate success. The cat breached the perimeter twice and had to be relocated with diplomacy. At 2:30, he went and picked up Liam and Chloe from preschool, which involved the stroller and a stop at the bodega on the corner where Chloe needed a popsicle for Noah, because that was what you brought someone who was sick, she explained with great patience. And Sebastian bought popsicles for everyone because it seemed like the right call. I was back at the apartment at 3:15. Chloe delivered Noah's popsicle with the gravity of a medic in the field, and Noah accepted it with a solemnity that matched the gesture. Liam sat on the floor near the couch and talked to Noah about what had happened at preschool, not expecting answers, just providing company. And Sebastian stood in the hallway and watched his 3 children together, and felt the specific weight of a man who has almost lost something he didn't know he had. At 4 o'clock his phone rang. It was his mother. He had not spoken to Margaret since the night of their phone call 11 days ago. She had called 8 times. He had not answered. He looked at her name on the screen now standing in Elena's hallway, and he declined the call and put the phone in his pocket. Elena, coming out of the kitchen with a bowl of soup for Noah, caught the expression on his face. "Her," she said. "Yes." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to hold her accountable," Sebastian said. "Legally, if there's a way. And personally, absolutely. But not today." He looked at his phone. "Today I'm here." Elena nodded slowly. She carried the soup to Noah. Liam immediately wanted to know if there was more soup. Chloe wanted to know if her popsicle had been enough medicine for Noah, or if he needed another one. And Sebastian Thorne stood in the hallway of a small apartment on a Tuesday afternoon in a gray sweater with no tag on it, with laundry in the dryer, and a biscuit-related security failure on his record, and 3 children in the next room who were his. And he thought with a clarity that was almost violent in its completeness, this is the only thing that matters. Not the tower, not the portfolio, not the empire his mother had decided his marriage was interfering with. This soup and this popsicle and this cat and these 3 people who had learned to be their own small nation because he hadn't been there to be part of the population. He walked into the living room, sat on the floor near the couch. Liam immediately came over and sat beside him and resumed the Marcus and the sticker grievance from the morning, updating Sebastian on the status of the words. Noah from the couch reached down and put his hand on Sebastian's shoulder without looking at him, just a touch, just a point of contact, like reaching for something solid when the ground is uncertain. Sebastian put his hand over his son's. And from the kitchen doorway, Elena watched the 2 of them, this man and her boy, this boy and his father, and for the first time in 5 years, she let herself feel something she had spent 5 years refusing to feel. Not trust, not yet, not forgiveness, not quite. But the first atom of something that could become those things, given enough ordinary Saturdays and enough Tuesdays when he showed up without being asked, and enough mornings with the right socks and the wrong egg and a lost shoe behind the cat. The first atom of something that had once, a long time ago, been the most natural thing in the world. It scared her. She turned back to the kitchen before he could see her face, but she did not put the wall all the way back up, and that in the particular language of Elena Sanchez was everything. By the end of that week, the custody arrangement had been informally agreed upon between the lawyers, 3 weekdays alternating weekends, structured but flexible, designed around school schedules and the children's needs, and the shared understanding that neither Sebastian nor Elena wanted this to be a war. Amanda Reyes called Sebastian on Friday to confirm the terms, and then said almost as an aside, "I've also been contacted by a private investigator who works with the firm. He's been looking into the documents your mother used at your request. He has something." Sebastian sat forward. "When he can meet Monday, Sebastian," she hesitated. "It's significant. I want you to be prepared." He said he would be prepared, and he spent the weekend at Elena's apartment on Saturday, and did not think about Monday, and focused entirely on pancakes and the park and the ducks and the sticker grievance, which Liam had updated to include a formal apology from Marcus that he had judged insufficient, but was considering accepting provisionally. Monday came anyway, as Mondays do. The investigator's name was Daniel Holt, and he was the kind of man who delivered devastating information in a flat, professional voice that somehow made it worse. He sat across from Sebastian in a conference room at the law firm and opened a folder and said without preamble, "The emails were fabricated by a firm your mother has used before. They do high-level document forgery. We have the original metadata from the server. The send dates were backdated, and the account used was a clone of yours, not your actual account. We can prove it." Sebastian looked into the documents. "The photographs," Holt continued, "are composite. Real photographs of you, backgrounds and context altered, professionally done, not cheap." "The letter," Sebastian said. Holt opened another section of the folder. "Handwriting analysis. Your mother had access to your handwriting samples through the estate correspondence. The letter is a forgery, extremely high quality, but the letter spacing in the lowercase r is inconsistent with your natural hand. Our analyst is prepared to testify." Sebastian sat with this for a long moment. "She paid for all of it," he said, "not a question. The payments are traceable through a shell account she's used for foundation disbursements, obscured but not well enough." Holt closed the folder. "You have grounds for a fraud claim potentially criminal, interference with family rights, document fraud. The DA's office would be very interested." Sebastian looked at the folder. At 5 years condensed into evidence. At the specific, detailed, expensive cruelty of what his mother had assembled to destroy his marriage and steal his children. "Give everything to my attorney," he said. "All of it." He stood up. He shook Holt's hand. He walked out of the conference room into the hallway and stood against the wall for a moment with his eyes closed. His mother had not made a mistake. She had not acted in a moment of anger or fear or impulse. She had planned it, had hired professionals, had constructed a precise and deliberate architecture of lies, designed to look like truth, delivered to a pregnant woman alone, calculated to produce exactly the outcome that had occurred. 5 years. He took out his phone and he called Elena. She answered on the second ring. In the background, he could hear the tail end of the school pickup noise voices and small feet on concrete. "Sebastian, I have the evidence," he said. "All of it. Provable forgeries. My attorney has everything." A silence. Long enough that he heard one of the kids say something to Elena, and heard Elena say quietly, "1 second, baby." "Elena," he said, "I am so sorry. I know that's inadequate. I know there's no version of those 2 words that covers 5 years. But I need to say it. I am so sorry." Another silence. When Elena spoke, her voice was very steady and very low. "Come for dinner tonight," she said. "Not Saturday, tonight. Come and eat dinner with us, and help with the bath and the bedtime and the whole terrible negotiation over how many stories is enough stories. Come and just be there, okay?" Sebastian pressed his free hand flat against the wall behind him. "I'll be there at 6, he said. 6:30, Elena said. "Because Chloe refuses to come to the table before 6:30 no matter what." 6:30, he said. He stood in the hallway for a moment after she hung up. Then he straightened his jacket and walked back toward the elevator, past the glass walls of the conference rooms, past the city visible through the building windows in the afternoon light, past the whole machinery of a world he had built and run and lived inside of for 15 years. He had somewhere to be at 6:30. The rest of it would wait. Dinner at 6:30 became dinner at 6:30 every Tuesday and Thursday, and then Wednesday too, and then the Saturdays extended past the park into the afternoon, and sometimes into the evening, and nobody formally decided this was happening. It simply accumulated the way water accumulates in low places, finding its level by the path of least resistance. Sebastian had been a father in practice for 6 weeks when Margaret Thorne showed up at his office. He had known she would come eventually. He had filed the fraud documentation with his attorney and had instructed Amanda Reyes to begin the process of what would become a civil suit: fraud, forgery, intentional interference with family rights, and he had known that the moment those papers were served to his mother's legal team, she would stop calling and start appearing. Margaret Thorne had not built her position in the world by staying on the phone. She was in his waiting room at 9 in the morning on a Wednesday, sitting in the chair nearest the elevator with her coat on and her posture in the specific register of a woman who has decided she will not be made to feel like a supplicant in her own son's building. Marcus met Sebastian at the elevator with a look that was as close to alarm as Marcus ever got. "She's been here since 8:15, Marcus said quietly. "She told security she had an appointment. She does not have an appointment." "I know," Sebastian said. He handed Marcus his bag. "Give me 10 minutes." He walked into the waiting room. Margaret looked up. She was 71 years old, and she looked it for the first time in Sebastian's memory. Not old exactly, not weakened, but the particular age of someone who has been carrying a secret for 5 years and has just had it taken from them. There were things around her eyes that he had not seen before. "You served me," she said. "Not an accusation, a statement." "Yes. Your father's company lawyer called me this morning. The board has been informed." "I know." She stood. She was still taller than most rooms gave her credit for Margaret Thorne. She had always had the ability to fill space in a way that made other people smaller. It was not working on Sebastian this morning. "I would like to speak with you privately." "No," Sebastian said. She blinked. "Sebastian, we are not doing this privately, Mother. Everything between us from this point forward goes through counsel." He kept his voice very level. "You had your private conversation with me. You told me it was necessary. I've heard what you had to say about it." Margaret's jaw tightened. "I did what I believed was right for you. You forged documents. You hired professionals to construct lies, and you delivered them to my pregnant wife when she was alone and frightened, and you threatened her with the full legal weight of this family." He said it the way he said things in the room when he needed everyone present to understand there was no version of this they were winning. "You did not do that for me. You did that for yourself, because she was not what you had planned, and you decided your plan mattered more than my family. You would have given everything up for her. You were already—" "Yes," Sebastian said. "I would have, and that was my right." He looked at his mother, this woman who had raised him, who had taught him to read a balance sheet at 11 and a room at 14, who had been the dominant force in his life for as long as he could remember, and he felt the particular grief of loving someone and not being able to forgive them, the two things existing simultaneously without resolving each other. "I have 3 children, Mother. My son Noah thinks very carefully before he trusts anyone, because he was raised in a world where the person who should have been his father wasn't there. My son Liam has been the man of the house since he could walk, because there was no other man available. My daughter Chloe gives everything she has to everyone she meets, because her mother taught her generosity is how you survive a world that hasn't given you enough." His voice stayed level through all of it. "Barely. That is what you made." Margaret said nothing. "The suit proceeds," Sebastian said. "My attorney will be in contact with yours. You will not contact Elena. You will not contact the children." He paused. "I'm sorry it's this. I genuinely am, but you made it this." He walked into his office and closed the door. He stood at the window for 3 minutes. Then he sat at his desk and opened his calendar, and there at 6:30 was a notation Marcus had added, "Dinner." He looked at it for a moment. Then he opened the Meridian file and went to work. That evening he told Elena about the confrontation over dinner, while Liam negotiated the vegetable situation, and Chloe fed pieces of her chicken to Biscuit under the table in a way she believed was invisible to adults. "How did it feel?" Elena asked, quietly, under the noise of the kids. "Like closing a door that should have been closed years ago," he said, "and like losing something at the same time." Elena looked at him. "She's still your mother." "I know. That doesn't excuse what she did." "I know that too. But you're allowed to grieve it, Elena said. The relationship you thought you had. It's a real loss even if she caused it. She said it with the directness of a doctor, clinical and compassionate at once, and Sebastian looked at her across a table covered in the debris of dinner with 3 4-year-olds and thought not for the first time that she was the most honest person he had ever known. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For that. For saying it like it's allowed." Elena held his gaze for a moment. Then Chloe knocked over her milk glass, and the moment dissolved into the controlled chaos of cleanup and recriminations, and Biscuit's opportunistic interest in the spillage, and Sebastian grabbed the roll of paper towels from the counter and dealt with the immediate crisis, and life continued its loud, imperfect, essential forward motion. 2 weeks later, he told the children. It was a Saturday after pancakes before the park. He and Elena had talked about it 3 times during the week, how, when, what words, in what order. Elena had consulted a child psychologist she trusted, who gave them a framework: simple language, clear facts, no over-explanation. Answer the questions they actually ask rather than the ones you anticipate. Let them lead. Don't make it a performance. The 3 of them were at the table, still in their Saturday morning states. Liam alert and already dressed Noah, with his specific syrup bottle positioned precisely. Chloe in pajamas with syrup on her face from a pancake she had eaten with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Sebastian looked at Elena. She gave him a small nod. "I need to tell you guys something important," Sebastian said. Liam looked up immediately. His face went to its reading the room expression. Chloe paused mid-bite. Noah did not move, but his quality of stillness changed. He was listening with his whole body. "You know how I've been coming every Saturday and some evenings too." "And Tuesdays and Thursdays," Liam said. "Precise. Yes, and the reason I come, the real reason, is because you 3 are my kids." Silence. Chloe's face did something complicated, processing like a small machine working through a large file. Liam said very carefully, "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm your dad," Sebastian said. "I'm your father. I know that's a big thing to hear, and I know you have questions and I want to answer all of them, but that's the truth." Another silence. Longer. Chloe said, "Like a real dad." "Yes. Like forever." Sebastian's voice, which he had kept entirely steady through the delivery of the information, did something small and involuntary at that question. "Yes," he said. "Like forever." Chloe turned to Elena. "Mama, he's our dad." "Yes, baby," Elena said. "He is." Chloe turned back to Sebastian with an expression of such complete, uncomplicated delight that it hit him like a wave. "I knew you were nice enough to be a dad," she announced, and slid off her chair and walked around the table and climbed into his lap with the total confidence of someone who has simply confirmed a thing she already suspected and settled there like she had always sat there and picked up her fork and continued eating her pancakes. Sebastian sat very still with his daughter in his lap and did not trust his face. Liam had not moved. He was looking at the table, his jaw doing the thing it did when he was thinking hard. Noah was also still, his eyes on his plate. "Why didn't you come before?" Liam said. His voice was even, not angry yet, processing. Sebastian had prepared for this question. He and Elena had talked about it carefully, about how much truth was appropriate for a 4-year-old, about the line between honesty and burdening a child with adult failures. "Because I didn't know about you," Sebastian said. "I didn't know you existed, and when I found out I came as fast as I could." Liam looked up. "You didn't know?" "No. I found out the day we met at the restaurant. Do you remember that day?" Liam was quiet, thinking back. "The bread day," he said. "Yes. That's when you found out. That's when I found out." Liam processed this for a long moment. Sebastian waited, not rushing. Then Liam said, "That must have been a big surprise." "The biggest of my life," Sebastian said honestly. Liam seemed to find this satisfactory in a way that was very. Liam, he had asked for the fact, he had received the fact, he had determined the fact to be internally consistent, and he could now continue. He picked up his fork. Noah still had not spoken. Sebastian looked at his middle son. Noah was looking at his plate, and his face was doing something private and careful. Elena made a small movement from her end of the table. Should I? And Sebastian shook his head just barely. He waited. After almost 2 full minutes, Noah said without looking up, "I thought you might be." Sebastian blinked. "You did." Noah looked up. "I thought you might be our dad, because of your face." He said it simply as though this were obvious. And because of the way Mama looks at you. Elena made a sound she turned into a cough. You didn't say anything, Sebastian said. I was waiting to see if you were going to leave, Noah said, completely direct, completely matter-of-fact, the most devastating thing Sebastian had heard in 48 hours. I'm not leaving, Sebastian said. Noah looked at him for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and picked up the syrup bottle and offered it to Sebastian, which was, Sebastian had come to understand over 6 weeks, the highest form of trust Noah Thorne dispensed. Sebastian took the syrup bottle. His hand was not entirely steady. He poured syrup on a pancake he had already finished and set the bottle back down, and Noah watched the whole thing with those careful eyes, and then finally something in them settled. Okay, Noah said, just that, okay, and went back to his breakfast. The park that Saturday was different from every park before it, not in any visible way that another person would have noticed. But Chloe held Sebastian's hand and called him Dad for the first time while they were walking. Dad, look at the dog. And Sebastian stopped walking for a full second before he recovered. And Liam at the climbing structure shouted, Dad, watch this, before he'd consciously registered what he was saying, and Sebastian watched, and when Liam reached the top, Liam looked down with an expression of such unguarded pride that Sebastian had to look away for a moment at something neutral. Noah by the duck pond sat beside Sebastian in their usual silence, and after a while said, The boss duck has a name now. I named him. What did you name him? Noah considered the seriousness of the disclosure. Gerald, he said. Sebastian looked at the duck. Gerald is a good name. I thought so. Noah paused. You can call him Gerald too, if you want. Sebastian looked at his son. Thank you, Noah. You're welcome, Noah said, and leaned against Sebastian's arm. The days organized themselves around a new architecture. Sebastian's apartment, the penthouse on the 53rd floor, with its curated silence and its view and its complete absence of syrup bottles and orange cats and wooden blocks, began to feel less like home and more like a hotel. He started finding reasons to be elsewhere. He came for dinners that extended past bedtime, past the 3-story negotiation, past the final drink of water and the last-minute declaration that someone needed to use the bathroom. He helped Elena fold laundry on Tuesday nights. He learned that Chloe needed 3 songs before she would sleep, and that the third one had to be the same every time a specific song Elena had made up years ago, which Sebastian asked her to teach him, and which he learned badly and sang worse, and which Chloe accepted without complaint. He learned that Noah's nightmares, when they came, required nothing more than a hand on his back and quiet, that the worst thing you could do was speak or turn on the light, and that if you just stayed and breathed slowly, Noah's breathing would eventually match yours and he would go back to sleep. He learned this because he was there one Thursday night when it happened, and Elena was already in the doorway looking exhausted, and he said quietly, I've got it, and she had looked at him for one long second and then stepped back. He sat with Noah in the dark for 40 minutes. When he came out, Elena was still awake, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea, and she looked at him with an expression he had no name for. He's okay, Sebastian said. I know, she said. He always is. It just takes a while. Does it happen often? Less than it used to. She wrapped both hands around her mug. He started sleeping better about 2 months ago. 2 months ago was when Sebastian had started coming for dinners. Neither of them said this out loud. Sebastian sat on the other end of the couch. It was 11:30 on a Thursday night, and he had a 7 o'clock board call in the morning, and he did not move to leave. I want to ask you something, Elena said, and I want you to answer honestly, not helpfully. Honestly. Okay. Is this sustainable for you? The schedule, the dinners, the nights, your company? Is running fine, he said. Sebastian. It is. Marcus has redesigned the structure around my availability, and the executive team is more capable than I've given them credit for, because I never gave them the chance to be. The company does not need me there 14 hours a day. It needs me for the things only I can do, and those are 4, maybe 5 hours of actual irreplaceable work. He paused. Everything else was just occupation. I was occupying myself. I didn't have anywhere else to be. Elena was quiet for a moment. And now you do. And now I do. She looked at him with that measuring look, the one that had not entirely gone away and might not entirely go away for a long time, and he accepted that. He accepted the measurement. He had earned it, or rather earned the necessity of it, through years of absence that preceded even the divorce. He would stand in the doorway of her trust for as long as it took for the door to open further. Then in the 5th week of November, Noah got sick again. Not a virus this time. Sebastian was at the office on a Monday morning when Elena called, and her voice was different from the Tuesday fever call. This was a different register, entirely stripped of the careful control she usually maintained, and he was standing up before she finished the first sentence. "The pediatrician sent him to the hospital," she said. "He's been pale for a few weeks. I thought it was the winter, but his blood work, Sebastian. His counts are wrong. They're doing more tests. I'm at Mercy General. I'm in the pediatric ward, and the kids are at school, and I don't know how long I'm going to be here, and I'm coming," Sebastian said. "I'm already coming. I'll get Liam and Chloe after school. Call me when you have anything." He was at Mercy General within 20 minutes. Elena was in a small consultation room on the 4th floor, and when she saw him, she did something she had not done in front of him in 5 years. She crossed the room and put her forehead against his shoulder. Not crying, not breaking, just needing for 1 second to be held up by something outside herself. Sebastian put his arms around her and stood very still and let her take 30 seconds of it, and said nothing. Then she pulled back and straightened, and her face went back to the version of itself that could function under pressure. "They're saying the white count pattern might indicate..." She stopped. "They're saying they want to rule out leukemia." The word landed in the consultation room like something physical. Sebastian sat down in the chair beside her and took her hand. Not romantically, the way you hold someone's hand when the information is too large to process standing up. "Okay," he said. "What do they need?" "More tests, a bone marrow sample to confirm or rule out. Results in 48 to 72 hours. "Okay." He was already thinking best hematologists, best pediatric oncologists, which hospitals had the most advanced protocols, which researchers he knew personally who could be contacted directly. He kept all of that inside. None of it was what she needed right now. "I'm here. Whatever the next step is, we do it together." Elena looked at their joined hands. "I'm scared," she said, very quietly, not like an admission, more like a fact she was naming, because naming things was how she processed them. "Me too," Sebastian said. It was the most honest thing he had said in years. He was terrified in a way that was entirely new, not the fear of losing money or losing a deal or losing the company, none of which had ever truly frightened him. This was the fear of losing a person. A small person with careful eyes and a name for a duck, and the specific wisdom of a child who had learned early that not everyone who arrived was going to stay. The 72 hours were the longest of Sebastian's life. I went between the hospital and the apartment, between Elena and the kids, keeping the machinery of normal life running for Liam and Chloe, who knew Noah was in the hospital, and who were told it was because the doctors needed to check some things, and who accepted this with the trust of children who have been told the truth consistently enough to believe it when it comes in simplified form. Liam on the second night came into the kitchen while Sebastian was making dinner, and said without preamble, "Is Noah going to be okay?" Sebastian turned from the stove, looked at Liam, thought about the easy answer and the true one, and chose the true one. "I don't know yet," he said. "We're waiting to find out. But I can tell you that the doctors are very good and that your mom and I are doing everything possible." Liam was quiet for a moment. "What's everything possible?" "It means we're not stopping," Sebastian said. "No matter what the next step is, we don't stop." Liam looked at him. Then he nodded once and said, "Okay," and went and set the table without being asked. The results came on a Thursday afternoon. Sebastian was at the hospital when the hematologist came in, a precise, kind woman named Dr. Alvarez, who sat across from both of them and delivered the information clearly. It was an early-stage condition, not the most aggressive form, caught early enough that treatment options were strong. There was a variant, however, in Noah's specific presentation that made his case more complex. He would need a bone marrow transplant. The best outcomes came from a biological sibling or parent match. Sebastian said before Dr. Alvarez had finished the sentence, "Test me." Elena turned to look at him. "Test me today," Sebastian said. "Right now, whatever the process is." Dr. Alvarez looked at him. "Are you the biological father?" "Yes," Sebastian said. "Confirmed by paternity documentation." "Then we'll get you typed today." She made a note. "Mr. Thorne, I want to be clear that a parent match is viable but not guaranteed to be optimal. We'll also type the siblings." All of it, Sebastian said. Whatever gives Noah the best chance. Elena was looking at him with an expression he could not read entirely, something layered and complex and running deeper than the immediate moment. He met her eyes and held them, and she looked away first, and he understood in the way he was learning to understand her silences that she was not looking away because she was unsettled. She was looking away because she was trying very hard not to let the thing she was feeling show. He was a match, not a perfect match. Dr. Alvarez explained the gradations, but strong enough more than viable, and in the specific profile of Noah's condition, the biological father match carried particular advantages. Sebastian sat in her office and listened to the medical details with the focused attention he had once reserved for financial analysis, and understood this was the most important negotiation of his life, and the terms were not money, and the currency was not leverage. The currency was being present, being the right person in the right place at the right time. He said yes before she finished the sentence. The procedure was scheduled for 3 weeks out to allow for preparation on both sides. Sebastian spent those 3 weeks going to the hospital with Noah, every appointment learning the rhythms of pediatric oncology, learning which nurses Noah had decided to trust, and which ones he was still reserving judgment on, learning that Noah in a hospital gown was still. Noah still quiet, still observant, still. The first one to notice when Sebastian's coffee cup needed refilling in the waiting room, pointing at it with the same wordless helpfulness he extended to everything. 2 days before the procedure, Noah said, "Are you scared?" Sebastian looked at him. They were sitting in the hospital waiting room, waiting for a pre-procedure check, and Noah had asked the question the same way he asked everything, without preamble, without softening, with complete directness. "A little," Sebastian said. "Mostly I'm just focused on what comes next." "Me too," Noah said. "Mama's more scared. She does the thing with her hands." "What thing?" Noah demonstrated, pressing the pads of the fingers together very slightly. "She does it when she's trying not to show it, like you do with your face." Sebastian looked at his son. This child who catalogued the people he loved with the precision of a scientist and the tenderness of someone who understood that paying attention was its own form of care. "You notice everything," Sebastian said. "I know," Noah said, not proudly, just as a fact. "Is it tiring?" Noah thought about this seriously. "Sometimes," he said, "but mostly I like it. It means I know what people need before they say it." He paused. "You needed someone to sit next to, on the bench, that first day at the park." Sebastian sat with that for a moment. "Yes," he said, "I did." "I knew," Noah said, and leaned against his arm in their usual configuration, and the waiting room continued its ordinary waiting room business around them. The procedure happened on a Tuesday morning in December, early enough that the hospital was still in its quiet pre-visitor hours. Elena held Noah's hand going in, and Sebastian walked on the other side, and at the door of the procedure room, Noah stopped and looked at both of them and said with total seriousness, "Gerald will be okay while I'm in here." It took both of them a moment to understand he meant the duck. "Gerald will be fine," Elena said with remarkable composure. "He's managed without us before," Sebastian said. Noah nodded, satisfied, and went in. Sebastian's part of the procedure was done first extraction, which was uncomfortable in a way he had been told to expect, and which he endured with the specific, focused patience of a man who has identified the only acceptable outcome and is committed to it. He was in recovery when Elena came to find him, and she sat in the chair beside the bed, and they waited together for the transfer to complete, for Noah to be moved to the recovery room, for the hours to pass in the particular suspension of hospital time. It worked. Not immediately. Recovery was measured in weeks, in careful monitoring and blood counts and follow-up visits, and Dr. Alvarez's cautious, precise optimism. But it worked. Noah's counts began to normalize. The color came back into his face. He requested from his hospital bed an update on Gerald, which Sebastian provided by going to the park and sending a photograph. Noah looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he said, "He looks good," with the satisfaction of a man whose affairs are in order. 3 weeks into Noah's recovery on a Wednesday evening, Elena and Sebastian were sitting at the kitchen table after the kids were in bed, not talking about anything urgent. The debris of dinner around them, biscuit on the chair between them, the particular exhausted piece of a house where 3 children are asleep. Elena said, "I've been thinking about the apartment." Sebastian looked at her. "This one," she said. "It's getting too small. With you here most of the time, it's the kids are sharing a room, and Liam has started complaining about the architectural limitations of his space, which is a direct quote. Sebastian was very still. What are you thinking? Elena looked at the table, then at him. I'm thinking that we've been doing this for 2 months, and you're here almost every night, and the kids have stopped distinguishing between the nights you're here and the nights you're not, in any way that suggests they think the nights you're not here are normal. She paused. I'm not saying I'm not trying to make this into something it isn't yet, but I'm saying that the practical reality of the situation is, I'll find a place, Sebastian said. Bigger, same neighborhood, something with a room for each of them and space that's actually ours, not my penthouse. He paused. Not anything that looks like mine, something that looks like all of us. Elena looked at him for a long moment. I'm not ready to call it everything yet, she said. Careful, honest, the way she was always honest, even when it cost her. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to call it anything. I'm asking if we can look. She was quiet. Together, he said. Just look. Elena picked up her mug, set it down, looked at the table for a moment with the expression of a woman who is doing a very careful calculation in a very complicated ledger. Then she said without looking up, Saturday, the kid's realtor from Liam's preschool mom group has listings. She said she'd show us 3 places. Sebastian's voice when it came was very even. Saturday works. 7, Elena said. Because Chloe is up at 6:30 no matter what anyone does about it, Sebastian said. I know. Elena looked at him. And this time, she did not look away first. She let him see what was in her face. Not all of it, not yet, perhaps not for a long time yet, but enough. The first real enough of it. The beginning of a thing that had once years ago in a small restaurant with magic bread been the most natural thing in the world, and was finding its way through all the damage and all the loss and all the ordinary Tuesday evenings and Saturday pancakes and duck pond silences back toward the surface. Good night, Sebastian, she said. Good night, he said. He got his jacket. He stopped at Noah's door on the way out, left it open a crack, the way Noah liked it enough light from the hallway to make the dark manageable. Liam was a still shape under his blanket. Chloe had migrated sideways in her sleep in a way that suggested she would be half off the mattress by morning. He stood in the hallway and looked at his children and felt the specific weight of a man who has been given back something he did not know he had and who understands with his whole self the cost of almost not getting it back. He went down the stairs and out into the December night. Saturday, he thought, just keep showing up. Saturday came and they looked at 3 apartments. The first was 2 formal high ceilings and white walls, and the kind of silence that would not survive 3 days with Liam and Noah and Chloe, let alone a lifetime. The second was too small, barely larger than Elena's current place, and Liam walked through it in 45 seconds and said, This is the same, with the flat certainty of a child who does not see the point of relocation without improvement. The third was on the 4th floor of a brownstone 12 blocks from Elena's current building, 6 blocks from the preschool, 4 blocks from the park with the duck pond. It had 5 bedrooms. It had a kitchen large enough for pancake production at scale. It had a hallway long enough that Chloe immediately ran its full length and back, which appeared to be her primary criterion for habitable space. It had a window seat in the largest bedroom where Noah sat down without being invited and looked out at the street below with the expression of someone who has found the correct spot and intends to remain. Liam stood in the middle of what would be the living room and turned slowly in a full circle, assessing. Then he said, The architectural limitations here are acceptable. Elena looked at Sebastian across the empty room. Sebastian looked back at her. We'll take the application paperwork, Elena told the realtor. They signed the lease on a Thursday in January, both of them named side by side on the document, and the realtor made a comment about what a beautiful family they were, and Elena said thank you. And Sebastian said nothing because everything he might have said was too large for a leasing office. They moved in on a Saturday in February, 2 days before the triplets turned 5. The move itself was organized chaos of a particular and exhausting kind. Sebastian had hired movers, professional ones, but had not anticipated that 3 5-year-olds would treat the moving process as an interactive experience requiring their full participation, which meant Chloe reorganized the box labeling system to her own specifications. Liam provided a running operational commentary that was genuinely more accurate than the mover's own communication. And Noah moved one specific item, his syrup bottle transferred personally by hand, and then supervised everything else from a position of strategic oversight. By 7 in the evening, enough of the furniture was in approximately the right rooms that the apartment was functional if not organized. Elena made pasta on the new stove because it was the one thing she could make with a pot and a pan and whatever had survived the move in accessible boxes. They ate it on the floor of the living room because the table was still in 3 pieces in the corner, all 5 of them, with Biscuit circling the pasta pot with the focused optimism of an animal who has identified a structural weakness in the dinner supervision. Liam said, "This pasta is good, but the table situation is a problem." "The table will be assembled tomorrow," Sebastian said. "By whom?" "By me." Liam looked at him with the expression he reserved for claims that required verification. "Do you know how to assemble tables?" "I assembled Noah's remote control car wheel." "That was one piece." "I'll figure it out," Sebastian said. Noah, without looking up from his pasta, said, "I'll help." And Chloe said, "I'll watch," which was Chloe's honest and self-aware contribution to most physical tasks. After dinner, after the bath negotiation, after the 3-story minimum requirement was met with 2 stories from Elena and 1 from Sebastian, in which he was required to improvise a continuation of a story about a duck named Gerald, who apparently had an ongoing adventure narrative that Sebastian had not known existed and had to be briefed on mid-performance by Noah in whispered, urgent installments after all of it. After the hallway light was left on at the precise angle Noah required, and Chloe's 3rd song was sung badly and accepted graciously, and Liam had conducted a final structural assessment of his new room and declared it provisionally satisfactory after all of it, Sebastian and Elena stood in the kitchen of the new apartment. It was 10:45. The apartment was quiet in the way of a place that has just been filled for the first time. Elena had her coffee, and Sebastian had his, and they stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island, and neither of them spoke for a moment. "We're doing this," Elena said. Not a question. "We're doing this," Sebastian said. She looked at him over her mug. "I need to say something." He waited. "I forgive you," she said. "Not your mother, not what happened, but you for the years before, the absence, the hours, the way you made me feel like I was waiting for something that kept not arriving." She set her mug down. "I forgive you, not because it didn't hurt, because I need to stop carrying it in the same room as everything else we're building." Sebastian looked at her for a long moment. He thought about saying he didn't deserve it. He thought about all the ways that was true. He decided that Elena Sanchez had spent enough years in a relationship with a man who prioritized his own internal experience over the thing she was actually offering him, and that the correct response to forgiveness was not to argue against it. "Thank you," he said. "I will spend a significant portion of the rest of my life trying to be worth it." Elena's mouth did the thing, the almost smile, the painful flash. Then it became an actual smile, small and real, and without performance, the first one he had seen on her face that was entirely unguarded. It lasted about 3 seconds. Then she picked up her mug and said, "The table assembly starts at 8. Noah will be up at 7 and will want to help and will be meticulous about it, and you need to be prepared for that process to take until noon." "I'll be ready at 7, Sebastian said. "Of course you will," she said. And there was something in it, in the of course, that was not sarcasm and was not quite tenderness yet, but was something in between, something that had been building for months through every Saturday and every Tuesday and every Thursday evening and every sick night and every duck pond silence accumulating, the way trust accumulates slowly, weight by weight, until one day you look up and it's substantial. He left that night. He still had the penthouse, would keep it for another month, while the transition completed, and he drove back to it through the January night and stood in its curated silence and looked at the city and felt the absence of syrup bottles and orange cats and the particular noise of people he loved being alive nearby. He did not sleep well. He was back at the new apartment at 7:02. The table took until 11:30. Noah's assessment of the instructions was that they were insufficiently detailed on the leg-to-surface interface, which was accurate, and his assistance took the form of holding each piece in exactly the right position, while Sebastian applied the hardware, which made the process longer and more precise and considerably more successful than it would have been alone. When the table was finished and upright and stable, Noah walked around it once, checking each leg, then sat in what was apparently already his chair and placed his hands flat on the surface. "Good," he said. Sebastian sat down across from him. "Good," he agreed. Chloe appeared from the hallway, having been informed by some internal sense that a new surface was now available, and climbed into her chair and put her elbows on the table with the confidence of a person claiming territory. Liam came in, assessed the table, revised his provisional rating to confirmed satisfactory, and sat down. Elena came out of the kitchen with pancakes. It was Saturday. Of course it was pancakes. She set the plate in the center of the table and looked at the four of them sitting there, her 3 children, and this man who had walked into a restaurant 4 months ago and had been arriving ever since, and her face did something private that she turned back to the kitchen before it could be fully witnessed. Sebastian saw it anyway. He saw it, and he stored it in the place where he kept the things that mattered, the place that had been empty for 5 years, and was filling now slowly and surely with ordinary moments that were worth more than anything he had ever purchased. Then came the morning 3 weeks later, when everything that had been building quietly inside the legal process broke open into the open air. Margaret Thorne's attorney called Amanda Reyes on a Tuesday morning with a settlement offer. Sebastian was at the new apartment in the middle of helping Noah with a puzzle that Noah did not need help with, but had invited Sebastian's presence for when his phone rang. "She's offering a full acknowledgement," Amanda said. "Written, notarized, delivered to the court. She admits to the document forgery, the interference, all of it. She's not contesting the fraud claim. In exchange, she's asking that the criminal referral to the DA be withdrawn." Sebastian was quiet for a moment. "What does Elena want?" he said. "I haven't called her yet. I called you first." "Call Elena first," Sebastian said. "It's her decision as much as mine. More." Amanda paused. "That's yes. I'll call her now." He set the phone down. Noah, without looking up from the puzzle, said, "Was that important?" "Yes," Sebastian said. "Is everything okay?" Sebastian looked at his son. At the puzzle in front of him, a complex 1/300 pieces, a map of the world that Noah had been assembling with the patient geographic precision of someone who found the shape of things deeply satisfying. "It's going to be," he said. Noah placed a piece. Europe clicked into place. He looked up. "Is it about the grandmother we haven't met?" Sebastian stilled. The children knew there was a grandmother. They knew in the partial, careful way that children know things that adults have half told them, enough to have formed a picture, not enough to have been burdened with the full architecture of it. "Yes," Sebastian said. "She's doing the right thing. It took her a while, but she's doing it." Noah considered this. "Is she going to meet us?" "I don't know yet. That's up to your mom." Noah placed another piece. "South America." "If she does," he said, "I'll reserve judgment." Sebastian looked at his son. "That's very fair of you." "I know," Noah said, and slid the puzzle piece home. Elena called Sebastian 20 minutes later. "I want the acknowledgement," she said. "I want it in writing and court permanent. I want there to be a record." Her voice was steady. "But I'm not pursuing the criminal referral." "Okay." "Not for her," Elena said, sharp and immediate. "For the kids. I don't want them to grow up knowing their grandmother is in prison. I don't want that to be part of their story." She paused. "She already took enough from them." "I agree," Sebastian said. "Do you—" "Completely." He meant it. He had been thinking about it for weeks, the line between justice and damage, between accountability and the particular cruelty of extending a conflict into the lives of children who had not asked for any of it. "The acknowledgement is enough. The record is enough. She knows what she did. We know what she did. That's enough." Elena was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. "Tell Amanda." The acknowledgement was filed on a Friday in February, the same week the triplets turned 5. Sebastian had asked Elena weeks in advance what the birthday tradition was. She had told him the Olive Branch Bistro, because that was where it had started, that was the place, and she had taken them every year on their birthday, even when it was hard, and even when walking past the memory of that first meeting made her chest tight, because the place mattered and the tradition mattered, and she was not the kind of person who let pain steal the things she loved. He had called the restaurant and arranged for the back room and the cake, and the particular magic bread that Chloe had promised him was their birthday special bread, a version with herbs that the kitchen made only for reserved occasions. They arrived at 6, all 5 of them, and the owner, a small, warm man named Marco, who had been running the place for 20 years, met them at the door and shook Sebastian's hand with the firm grip of someone who knew, without being told, that this was significant. The back room had been decorated by Chloe's specifications, which Sebastian had obtained through a careful prior interview, and which had required significant negotiation with the party supply situation, resulting in a color scheme that could best be described as ambitious. Liam approved of the structural arrangement of the tables. Noah went immediately to the seat with the best sightline to the door, which Sebastian had identified in advance and reserved. They ordered, they ate. The bread was as promised magic. Chloe said halfway through the meal, "Dad, this is the best birthday." She said it the way she said most things, easily, completely, with the whole of herself behind it. No reservation, no calculation. Just the simple statement of a child who has assessed the evidence and reached a conclusion. Sebastian said, "It's the best one I've been to." "You haven't been to the other ones," Liam pointed out. "That's why this one is the best," Sebastian said. "It's the only one." Liam considered this. "That's logical," he conceded. Noah, looking at his bread, said quietly enough that only Sebastian heard it, "Happy birthday to us." Sebastian looked at him. "Happy birthday, Noah." Noah looked up. And for the first time since Sebastian had known him, since the first day at the restaurant, since the bench by the duck pond, since the hospital, since all the mornings and evenings and Saturdays of the last 4 months, Noah Thorne smiled at his father with his whole face. Not the measured, reserved approval of a careful child, not the assessment of someone gathering data. A real smile, the unguarded kind, the kind that meant the deliberation was over, and the verdict was in, and the verdict was yes. Sebastian had to look at his plate for a moment. When he looked up, Elena was watching him. She had been watching him the way she had watched him since the beginning, measuring, assessing, checking the pattern against the promise. But what was in her face now was different from the beginning. The calculation was still there, but underneath it, running through it like a current, was something that had been building for 4 months of ordinary days, something that had survived the hospital and the legal battle and the moving boxes and the table assembly and the 11:30 conversations in the kitchen. It was not a simple thing. It was the complicated, chosen, earned thing that comes after loss and after forgiveness and after the long, patient work of building trust from the damage of its absence. It was not the effortless thing they had once had that was gone, and neither of them would pretend otherwise. It was better than that, in the way that things rebuilt with full knowledge of how they break are better than things that have never been tested. "Hey," Sebastian said quietly across the birthday table. "Hey," Elena said, and that was all. Just that. Two people who had been through the worst version of their story and had arrived somehow at the beginning of a better one. Two people with 3 children between them and 5 years of absence behind them and the rest of their lives in front of them, measured not in assets or acquisitions or square footage of empire, but in magic bread and duck ponds and table assemblies and the particular music of 3 children who were finally, fully, completely home. After dinner, walking back to the apartment, all 5 of them, the kids between them, Chloe holding one of Sebastian's hands and one of Elena's in the specific configuration she had recently claimed as her own. Liam said, "Can we come here every year?" "Yes," Elena said. "Even when we're old. Even when you're old," Sebastian said. "How old is old?" Chloe asked. "Very old," Liam said with authority. "As old as Gerald," Chloe said. "Gerald the duck is not that old," Noah said with the precision of someone who has been monitoring Gerald's aging process with scientific attention. "How old is Gerald?" Chloe said. "Unknown," Noah said. "But he's doing well." And Liam said, "I feel like we should get Gerald a birthday cake." And Chloe said, "Gerald's birthday," with the volume and conviction of someone who has just identified a moral obligation, and the birthday cake for Gerald became the primary topic of conversation for the remaining 4 blocks, with Sebastian contributing the logistical observation that ducks preferred bread to cake, and Elena contributing the regulatory note that feeding wildlife in the park was technically discouraged, and Noah contributing the intelligence that Gerald specifically would eat anything if you were patient about it. They reached the building. They went upstairs. The bedtime process was extended by birthday-related energy and the Gerald cake planning session, and 2 additional stories, and a prolonged negotiation over whether birthdays entitled anyone to a later bedtime a position. Liam argued with his usual rigor, and Elena declined with her usual finality. When the hallway was finally quiet, Sebastian stood in the kitchen with his jacket still on, and Elena stood across from him, and they were alone in the apartment for the first time all day. "Stay," Elena said. Sebastian looked at her. "Not—" She stopped, started again with the directness she always found when she needed it. "I'm not saying everything is figured out. I'm not saying we skip the part where we figure it out. I'm saying it's late and the couch is long enough, and I'm tired of watching you put your jacket on and go back to the penthouse every night when you're already home." The last word landed in the kitchen between them. Sebastian took his jacket off. He hung it on the hook by the door, the hook that Chloe had labeled with a piece of masking tape and a drawing of what was either a coat or a cat, the interpretation remaining contested, and he turned back to Elena. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. She handed him a blanket from the hall closet and went to her room, and he went to the couch, and the apartment settled into its nighttime quiet, with all 5 of its people inside it. And Biscuit came out from wherever Biscuit went during the chaos of dinner and children and birthdays, and settled onto the end of the couch near Sebastian's feet, with the absolute authority of an animal who has decided this is where he belongs. Sebastian lay in the dark and listened to the apartment breathe. He heard Chloe turn over in her sleep the way she did dramatically, like someone making a point. He heard the particular silence of Noah's room, the deep sound sleep of a child who has been sick and is now genuinely, completely recovered. He heard from down the hall the soft movement of Elena settling, and then the quiet deepening into the specific piece of a house where everyone who should be present is present. I had $3 billion and a tower with his name on it, and an empire that ran on his decisions and his reputation, and the force of his singular focus. He lay on a couch with a cat on his feet, in an apartment that smelled like birthday dinner and children, and the specific domestic accumulation of a life fully lived, and he felt for the first time in longer than he could clearly remember that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He had walked into a restaurant on an ordinary Tuesday in October, looking for nothing in particular, chasing some nameless ache down 14 blocks of Manhattan sidewalk, and he had found everything. Not the way stories say you find things, not suddenly, not in a single blinding moment of revelation. He had found it the way real things are found, the way trust is built, and forgiveness is earned, and families are made one ordinary day at a time, one Saturday pancake at a time, one syrup bottle and broken toy and sick night and duck pond morning at a time. He had learned that legacy is not a building with your name on it. He had learned that power is not what you own, but what you choose, and that the most important choice a person makes is not where to invest their money, but where to invest their presence. He had learned that showing up unglamorous, imperfect, consistent, without the performance of grand gestures, but with the daily reality of just being there, is the only form of love that children believe in, because it is the only form they can see. He had learned all of this from 3 5-year-olds and the woman who had raised them alone for 4 years, with nothing but her own extraordinary strength and the unshakable conviction that her children deserved someone who stayed. He was staying, not because a court had ordered it, not because his lawyer had structured it, not because the pattern of his obligation required it, because this couch, this cat, this quiet apartment, this woman down the hall, these 3 people who had taken the whole of his defended and armored and carefully maintained heart and simply casually, completely dismantled it. This was the only thing in 36 years of his life that had ever made him feel like he was living rather than operating. In the morning, Chloe would be up at 6:30 and the pancake discussion would begin, and Noah would need the syrup bottle positioned correctly, and Liam would have a position on something that required respectful engagement, and Biscuit would make at least one catastrophic decision involving the counter, and it would be loud and imperfect and completely irreversibly his. Sebastian Thorne closed his eyes. He was already home.